This is the Ask Faleskini podcast, where the modern economy is discussed from a skeptic's perspective. Mr. Faleskini helps you distinguish what is sustainable in our economy and what isn't. Not everything that glitters is gold, and not all mud is dirty. The podcaster Mr. Faleskini provides no-nonsense advice. He had it all, lost it all, went bankrupt multiple times, and is now attempting to come back from zero with sustainable growth. There are numerous coaches and preachers on the internet that preach about positive thinking and how life is all roses if you just care to see it that way. Well, Mr. Faleskini is definitely not one of them. We recommend you ask Faleskini to keep it real. He discusses the darker side of the current economic reality, the side that's more important for your personal and business finance. His first intention is to help you keep what you already have. Not to be a complete party pooper, Mr. Faleskini will also hint at the earning opportunities in the economy today. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please like, share, and subscribe. And now it's time to start taking notes. The mic goes to the podcaster, the one and only Mr. Faleskini.
Welcome to the Ask Faleskini podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Chad Wittfeldt from Aurora, Colorado. Chad started his entrepreneurial journey very young. He started a landscaping company and electronic arbitrage business in his teenage years. He quickly focused on investing in equities and currency market. Chad later became full-time investor and real estate entrepreneur already in his 20s. Today, he's a real estate investor, multifamily syndicator, passive income producer, cash flow creator, branding, and automation expert. Chad, please tell us more about yourself. What is your story?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up pretty run-of-the-mill, middle-class, Midwest Michigan. And in that environment, everyone around you was told to go to college for 4 years, get a degree in engineering or finance, and go work for GM or Ford. And at the very height of your career, you might make 50 grand, 60 grand, settle down, meet a nice lady. Maybe one day you'll buy a boat, right? And that was really the path set out before me for majority of my adolescent life, right? It wasn't until I started working at a fairly affluent country club that I really got a taste to the other side of life, right? And I go to work at this country club, and I'd see these guys pulling up in their Maseratis and their Ferraris on a Tuesday afternoon to drink beer and play golf with their buddies all day, right? And after some years and some iteration of building relationships and conversations with these gentlemen, I realized very quickly they all owned or operated something. They weren't trading time for money. They were owning things. And so that's really what sparked this whole world, this journey for me at a really young age, 16 years old. And there's been a lot of iterations through seasons ever since. And it's just been a heck of a ride.
Great story. I must ask you this. In US, it's very popular book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad from Kiyosaki. Have you read that?
I have, yeah.
Was that one of the influences?
I think so. I'm not so sure. I think at that point that I had started seeking outside knowledge, it was already influenced in me. I already knew I was going to go down this path, right? So, yeah. I mean, I think it's a great book. I think a lot of it is great in theory and in practice, but it doesn't really give you a whole lot of tacit ideology to execute on. It gives you a lot to theorize on. So
how did you learn? On your mistakes, or did you have a mentor?
Yeah, mostly a lot of mistakes. So I failed my first business at 21. I failed my second business at 23. That left me pretty penniless and in a rough spot, right? That I had to dig myself back out of. So I was parking cars as a valet 40, 50 hours a week to keep a roof over my head through my 20s while I was working on syndicating my first apartment deal. Right. So it was a really, really challenging place in my life that I had to grow through to get to the other side. And just endless resilience and like being willing to lose, being willing to fail, being willing to go say no. And yeah, I never really had too much of a direct mentor. But
when you say your business is failed, was that just that you could not keep up anymore? Or did you have to go into the bankruptcy procedures, Chapter 7, Chapter 11, and similar?
no, we never had to go through bankruptcy procedures. Every business I've ever been involved in has been net cash positive day one. Right. So we never had, every single business I've ever touched has always been day one net cash flow positive. So that's a fantastic thing. Both of those were misalignments of partnerships. Both of those companies that failed were misalignments of partnerships. And so I learned a really, really important lesson at a very, very young age when it comes to partnerships. First and foremost, like one thing that I did wrong was today, let's say you want to start a business today, right? You might be projecting your revenue over your first quarter for what, let's just say your first quarter in business, you're projecting 40 grand a quarter for your first quarter, right? You're like, oh, well, I can give up some equity. I can get a partner. He can help me. It's going to be a fantastic thing, right? Equity is extremely expensive. And I think that most people in that early phase don't really future pace out what that equity could be worth 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road when you're doing multiple 7 and 8 figures in that company. Now, what's that equity worth? Right. So that's first and foremost. Second, never partner with somebody who's exactly like you. Right. Like, so just an arbitrary example of that. Like, let's say I wanted to start like a sales advisory company. I've got 10 years in top dog sales at a Fortune 500 company. So I go to my buddy, John, he was the same thing, sales leader at a Fortune 500 company. I said, John, we're going to start the sales advisory company. I want you to partner with me. Why on God's green earth do I need to partner with John when we have the exact same set of skills? What one of us brings something to the table that the other person doesn't? And I had to learn that lesson as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Extremely interesting experience. And I believe that everyone that starts an entrepreneur journey starts with buddies that are similar to them, and then learn the hard way that the better would be if you start with someone with completely different set of skills, as you mentioned. I would like to ask you a thing about it. How do you go about partnership now? Are you a principal partner? Are you a minority partner? How's your business structured now? How you go about, let's say, new business?
Yeah, well, it depends on the companies. We have a portfolio of companies that we work with and have equity in now. So it really depends on how they're structured and what the deals look like. But we're just let me pull back here for a minute. I think the most important thing for any person who's out on this journey to get to is to get to a number where they're not desperate to do more business. They're not desperate to partner. They're not desperate for their next deal. They're not desperate for the next consulting contract, whatever that business is. If you can get to a cash flush position where you can start to be picky and choosy with the business you take on, you can really plant your flag somewhere that really aligns with not only who you are, but who you want to work with. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's much, much easier for us now, because back then when I was a broke, young 20-year-old kid, like I couldn't say no. Right. And that's a really, really challenging place. Now I can pick and choose whoever I want to work with, and it makes it much, much easier to structure deals that align with everyone's interests. And so a lot of the deals we work with now, we are minority partners. We partner as growth partners with a lot of real estate funds and syndications, and we'll waterfall into equities on KPI. And yeah, but still very, very picky with the operators we work with.
Do you have any tests? I don't know if you're familiar, Tai Lopez has a questionnaire or a quiz that poses to everyone that he wants to do business with. Do you have any method like this that you can disclose? What is the best way for our listeners to go forward and to choose partners? What they have to pay attention? Is there any method to all this madness? Or is the trial and error the only way that you can be successful in picking your next partner?
Yeah, I think more importantly, like just I don't have like do this, do this, do this, do this. But for me, what works really, really well is I learned to start treating business partnerships like marriages.
Mhm.
Right? Like you have to go like to truly work with the people you want to work with, you have to go through a phase of courtship, right? You have to build that level of friendship, because a lot of people say don't do business with friends. And that while that can be true, I personally feel like you should be friends with the people you end up doing business with, because good friends ultimately respect each other. Right. And if you have that mutual level of respect in your arrangements, it can go a long way. And without it, it can lead to a demise very, very quickly. Right. And so go ahead.
Sorry, you mentioned like a marriage. So how important is the partnership agreement? How important is the letter of understanding that we know that we are on the same page with our partner? When do you start bureaucratizing your relationship? What is the best time to start?
Yeah, I think it's remarkably important, because without it, you don't have clear direction of roles and responsibilities, and accountability, right? And so inside of those partnership agreements, you should absolutely have everything very, very well disclosed. Who's responsible for what role they're going to play in the company. And then I always, it's not easy. It's not an easy conversation, but I always recommend having clawback provisions in your agreements as well. Meaning, if somebody is a non-performer, their provision in that company gets clawed back. Their equity gets clawed back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I've seen it happen. I've experienced it, right? You have a business partner and everything's going great. He starts going through whatever, he starts going through a divorce. He starts going through something, and the business goes by the wayside. He's not pulling his weight. He's not doing anything. And he's still taking, 30, 40, 50% of that company with little to no input on the outside. You want to have something that you can fall on to claw that back. And I think that's really, really important as well. But
do you have a legal team within your organization, or you hire an outside legal team?
I hire outside. And truthfully, though, like another thing, I mean, just it really depends on what business industry. One thing that you can do to test a partnership before going into full blown equity is do something contractual, right? Like do just one deal together.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to necessarily start a company as 50-50 partners to right out the gates, right? Like you can go and test and do like one deal together and make sure it goes well before wanting to be full blown partnership as well. And we do that all the time with our employees before contractually hiring them on, right? They go through a 2-week training period that they have to qualify through and pull their weight through before they become a full-time contractual employee with our companies. Right. So you can test relationships and put stress tests on them and make sure they are what you think they are without getting too far along down the road.
You are extremely witty as far as hiring is concerned. Do you use outside help for your human relationship management?
No. We're a small team. Like we operate very, very lean. It's a team of 6, and I'm very, very still involved in the company. I haven't removed myself from it. So yeah.
So when considering equity investment, what would you say? What would you suggest to our listeners is the top priority when vetting a new partner or potential partner?
Yeah. So I mean, to this day, I still I'm very much active investing and passively investing. So I've written checks as an LP, a limited partner in my friends' deals, right? Self-storage development and a multifamily acquisition, right? And so for me, having been on the active side and then also participating in the passive side, I had a very, very intimate look at why a lot of deals don't go right. Right? They end up not meeting their projections. They end up needing a capital call. They end up losing their hard EMD. The deal falls apart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Every single time, it's because the operator didn't have the experience to get the deal across the finish line against their projections of where they, I don't want to say promised, but essentially promised where it was going to go. And so picking an operator that you know, like, and trust, and that has a verifiable proof of track record of cycling opportunities, it's just a much like easier way to work with instead of taking a gamble on a new guy, I suppose.
Okay, so
but people took a gamble on me when I was a new guy, so
Yeah. So you are now established company. You have years of experience. If I understand correctly, you are just working now or doing business with people with track record. How could new guys like yourself 10 years before get into business? What is their choice? What do they have to offer to you to convince you? Is there any chance that they would say, okay, I'll do that for free in order to prove myself? Let's do something small and you don't need to pay me if I'm not good enough. What would be the way to convince yourself to hire a new guy?
Yeah, I actually have people do that to me to this day all the time. I just had this guy approach me to build out a KPI dating tracking process through API, and just he's like, "Let me build it for you. Pay me when I'm done, and when you know it works." I'm like, "All right, cool. You've got nothing to lose. Go, here's the logins. Go build it. Sweet." All right, so that is definitely a strategy. I think on a much larger scale, when we're talking millions of dollars, not a couple $100, we're talking millions of dollars. Your only option, truthfully, and I'm really passionate about this, your only option is to be honest, right? Mm-hmm. Like, don't come to the table acting like you've got, 7 years of experience and this, that, the other thing. You got to be honest that you're new. This is what you want to do. These are your intentions, and come to the table correct, because I see this happen a lot. Like, people that are new, and I'm not going to lie, like, I kind of fell into this trap too in the very beginning. People fall into this trap of being new and feeling like they need to overcompensate for it. Mm-hmm. Right. And so they show up in a facade, show up as somebody that they're not. And I think the sooner and the quicker that you can show up as unapologetically yourself and honest and confident as yourself, people are going to respect you far, far more for that. So
honesty is still the best policy, even in a business. You don't believe in fake it till you make it.
No, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not.
Because truth be told, mentorship program for young partners, so that you know that they lack experience, they have great ideas. Would you mentor them? Do you have anyone in your team that, like a senior staff member, that would take care of all the risks that they are facing, or they are oblivious even to some risks because they don't have a first-hand experience in the industry?
No, we don't. There's a lot of people out there offering that type of service, especially on the real estate side of things. Now, a lot of them will create these mentorship programs on real estate just to create a perpetual cycle of deal flow for themselves. Mm-hmm. They have hundreds of people out there paying them a mentorship fee to bring them deals, and bring them investors. And right. So it's kind of a lot of times a self-fulfilling cycle. So I don't really have anything specific to recommend on that. I think for me, first and foremost, like, it's not for everybody. Just being an entrepreneur or investor in general, like, isn't for everybody. And that's completely okay. I think in today's day, a lot of people see the glitz and the glamour that come with it, but they don't really see the shadows, right? And so understanding yourself and to decide whether or not it's for you in the first place, right? Because the overwhelming majority of people are not going to make it through. Mm-hmm. There's a massive amount of ambiguity along your income, along your time, when it's going to work out, how it's going to work out. And I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh, you have to be willing to fail to be successful, this, that, the other thing. Ideally, like, you don't fail at all. Like, I'm not proud that I failed 2 companies in my 20s. I'm not proud of that. Right. But that was the path that God put before me to get me to the other side. And with that being said, it's okay if it's not for you. Like, understanding, like, if you need consistency in your life, you need consistent income, you need consistency in your roles and your responsibilities, all of these components at home, Like it might not be for you. That's completely fine. Go focus on a career that you can make as much money as humanly possible, and then go invest it into cash flowing assets or appreciating assets, whichever one or both, right?
Mhm.
And you can do just fine that way too. Like you don't have to take all the risk to be the guy, because I promise you, it's not nearly as fun and sexy as everyone on Instagram likes to make it out to be. And
Yeah,
that's okay. So
I would like to ask you about the leverage. You
yeah.
already explained about your knowledge that you use as a leverage and all your experience. But I'm sure in property deals, you cannot avoid financial leverage. Right now, interest rates are going up.
Mhm.
How is that how does that influence your business? What do you think the future will be for real estate investors in US?
Yeah, I love that question. I personally feel like the delta that we're having with interest rates and supply on the market is really a fantastic thing, because what you're seeing play out is amateur saturation getting shaken out of the market, right? Every industry has amateur saturation. Doesn't matter if it's real estate investing, SMMA, Amazon FBA, whatever it is, it's flooded with amateurs. And oftentimes that can make it challenging when you're looking. Let's just paint an arbitrary picture here. Let's say I'm an acquisitions manager, and my role and my responsibility in the company is to bring the company new deal flow. Or let's say we're an apartment syndication business. My role is to bring the company new deal flow. 12 months ago, I'm calling every broker I know, and he says, Chad, quit calling me. You're the 40th person who called me today looking for a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Right now that interest rates are on the rise and the amateurs have no idea how to qualify and put a deal together, they're not saturating out the market anymore. Right? Yeah, the interest rates suck, but you're not getting married to an interest rate. You can always refinance out your interest rate. Right? When? I don't know. I'm not the Fed. Right? But we can still get deals done because one, the saturation fell out of the market. And two, every portfolio that we work with is, over $100 million portfolio. So we can still get deals locked up where the numbers make sense. And not everyone in the industry can do that, right? Because a lot of the guys that were, a lot of those 40th calls of those 40 calls to brokers looking for deals, they were looking for their first one. They were looking for an assignment fee, whatever. They were amateurs. And that's okay, right? They got shaken out. So it just is what it is.
So, for first-time investors in property, would you recommend taking on a loan and leverage, or would you recommend a non-leverage investment for the first-time investors?
It really depends on your risk appetite, right? And I just think if without any leverage, I think the challenge there, like for me, I've always been a more, um, I've always took on more risk than the average person, right? Just even in just like life decisions in general. And I think the really challenging thing with that question is if you say, no, don't take on any leverage for your first rental property, not many guys are going to have. I mean, look, you can't even buy a freaking piece of crap house in America for less than 500 G's, right? What average guy working 40 hours a week at a Fortune 500 company is sitting on 500 G's to just buy a house for his first rental property? Not many, right? And so if you say, oh, don't hold any leverage on your rental property, you will perpetually use that as a barrier to entry to never do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a challenge, right? So I think calculated risk is really the answer to that. If you need to put a second mortgage on your primary residence that your wife and your kids live under and refinance it out to the nines, it's probably not the best idea. No. But if you are looking to acquire, a $400,000 property, you got $100,000 in cash. Yeah. Put the minimum down, put a tenant in it, let it pay the rent. and you got backflow in case something doesn't work out with the tenant, or if you want to do Airbnb or whatever. But I mean, I think that's a fantastic thing if you use it correctly. But the challenge is most people don't, right? But that has so many advantages, including tax advantages. And I just would recommend anyone in that place who has no idea, you really spend some time educating yourself to our traditional financial system. Make sense of it.
Is there any book that you can recommend on the topic, or any online course that you would recommend for the first-time buyers?
Just Google, YouTube, man. Google and YouTube. I think I went to college for 4 years, right? And I don't necessarily recommend college to everybody. I didn't learn anything applicable from college that I use today, other than the simple fact that I learned how to learn. I learned how to acquire and compartmentalize new knowledge, right? And so oftentimes, like, you know, a large contingent part of my workday is me just learning, scouring the internet to learn new things. Like, that's a huge role that I take on, right? And you're not going to learn like just sitting on your phone all day scrolling TikTok. Like, you got to go find the knowledge and really, like, I need to learn this. Okay, great. Go out and do it. Like, truth be told, man. And here's the other, this is completely different side tangent, but here in the United States, we have this massive phenomenon, and I call it mental masturbation. Right. And the phenomenon here is, like, let's say a guy wants to get into real estate. This year, he's going to go to 7 different real estate conferences, right? He's going to buy 4 different real estate books. He's going to buy 2 different real estate courses. And he spends the entire year just tickling his mental. Oh, I'm learning. Oh, I'm networking. Oh, I'm doing this thing. I'm doing this business. Da, 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 da. Never once does he pick up the phone and call a broker, right? Never once does he pick up the phone and call somebody he knows to see if they would be interested in investing in real estate with him. Never once does he actually go take the action that is going to truly drive him to the end result. Instead, he runs around the entire country tickling his mental. I'm going to this conference. I'm doing this thing. I'm wearing this badge. I posted it on my Facebook. It's like, all right, come on, dude. That happens all the time here. And bless their hearts, but they will never be successful.
So there's no substitute for first-hand experience, if I understand correctly.
The world will tell you. The world will tell you. Like, the accomplishment of you doing the thing is going to tell you what to do better next time. Okay. Can you shortcut that path? Absolutely you can. But you got to go out and actually go do the thing.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like our listeners to take from this interview? Any quick tips of the trade, or any trade secrets that you can share?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, if you end up getting down in this space, if you end up going down that road and wanting to embody on that type of journey, or if you're in it right now and you're finding yourself challenged, the most important thing to understand is that every single thing that you go through is your fault. It's all your fault. Deal doesn't go through, it's your fault. Employee doesn't work out, it's your fault. Investor falls through, it's your fault. It's always your fault, perpetually, to the end of time. And I'll tell you why. The second that you start to blame things that are going wrong in your business and your deals, et cetera, on outside forces, regardless if they are truly out of your control or not, you start to open up yourself to a mindset that is just proven time and time again to not be successful. Right. So why cultivate a mental model that you know is not going to work? Right. The second you start opening yourself up for external validation of failure, oh, it's his fault. Oh, it's the broker's fault. Oh, it's the lender's fault. Like, you're never going to get to the other side of that. So walk into this knowing every single thing to the end of time is going to be your fault. And if you're not comfortable with that, it's probably not a good fit for you.
Okay, Chad. Where could our listeners start following you, or where could they even reach you?
Yeah, you can find me at Chad Wittfeldt on social medias, and take a look at what I got going on over there. I got nothing to sell, nothing to offer to anybody. So
Yeah, I'll put the link in the description below. Thank you, Chad, for being my guest tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Faleskini, for this outstanding podcast. And thank you for listening to the Ask Faleskini podcast until the end. Mr. Faleskini would love to hear your feedback in the comments. And don't forget, if you want to know, ask Faleskini or listen to the Ask Faleskini podcast. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.